When we're having interactions with women or people in general, actually, this concept will actually apply both to your romantic interactions as well as your platonic ones. So, with friends, with family, with strangers, with new women, with, well, whoever, right? But any interaction can kind of fall into one of these three levels of conversation, all right? Each conversation or each interaction might have like a certain percentage of each. Okay. So those three levels of conversation, starting from kind of like least ideal to most ideal, is one, the first level of conversation, which is kind of the worst, or for our specific goals, is generic or kind of third party conversation. So what I mean by that is conversation that is about something else, right? So this is conversation about the weather. This is conversation about the game. This is conversation about a book that you guys both like, or an anime you guys both like, or about a water bottle that is cool, or whatever else, right? It. I think a lot of guys feel like they have to have something to relate to be able to talk to someone else. But the thing is, as soon as you do that, you actually fall into the trap of having kind of generic third party conversation. So how you can kind of tell is that if you have the same conversation and instead of an attractive woman, it is a grandpa, and it's not weird, or it's like your little niece or something, like if it's the exact same conversation and you wouldn't change anything about it, you can kind of tell it's like level 1. All right. So level 2 is where it gets more relevant to either me or to her, right? So what are things that people always care about? Ourselves, right? So when you're talking to another girl, you're talking to someone else about them, that immediately actually becomes much more relevant and becomes like better, like type of conversation. Okay. So what this means is talking about me, talk like if I have like a story to share, or for her, it means kind of learning more about her, trying to understand her, trying to give her value, and understand like where she is like coming from, right? And what's cool about this is that even if you're talking to someone you've never met, but you're talking about them, that's actually a really easy way for them to start caring about it, right? So I'll explain a little bit more on how to execute that, because most people might hear that and be like, oh, yeah, duh, talk about her. Let me ask her a bunch of questions. And what that ends up doing is that they turn into kind of like an interviewer, right? So, especially if, we're talking about the context of like trying to flirt, trying to create tension, right? What we don't want to do, or like a date context, right? We don't want to become an interviewer, right? Yes, that is a way to get to know her, but it is doing something called value taking. Whereas what we want to do is something called value giving. Okay. So again, level 1, generic third party. Level 2, that is conversation about me or about you, and, or her, I should say. And level 3 is conversation about us. So this is the type of conversation that refers to how I feel about you, how you feel about me, what we've done together in the past, what we'll do together in the future, hypothetical stuff, just being silly. And most people's conversations, they've like, if they were to like have AI transcribe it or something, with these metrics, most people's interactions, most people's dates probably fall in like the 1 and 2, with like a much bigger percentage of stuff in 1. Okay. And then that is why your dates feel weird or awkward, right? Ideally, what we want to do is have a much larger percentage of our conversation be level 2 and level 3. Okay. So that being said, of course, we can still have like third party conversation and stuff like that. But we want to keep it to a minimum, and we could actually pivot them into conversation that is about her. All right. So I will go like much, much deeper into this in the authentic attraction module. But here, what you have to understand is that there's like value giving and value taking, right? So if I'm constantly asking and asking and asking for stuff that you already know, um, it's not fun. It's not enjoyable, right? And most people, they get this mistake, especially in like the early aspects of dating, that they feel like, oh, I have to really get to know this person. I have to know if they are a good fit for my life, if they're qualified for me, right? And that is important. But what's even more important is to see if you guys are able to have fun together, if you guys are able to have chemistry together, if you guys can play together, right? And that is kind of a priority, Because if you don't get that and it's not fun at the minimum, you're not going to get, even if she is on paper, or like, if she is actually everything you want, because you asked all those questions, she's not going to want to spend more time with you, right? On a second date, third date, whatever else, right? So it's really important to prioritize kind of like spiking emotions, basically. And naturally, if you do what I show you in the authentic attraction module, you will not only learn how to spike your emotions, but you will also be able to find out those same type of information that you would if you were just doing an interview. Okay, so that is more of a framework, more of a structure, and I'll give plenty more examples there. But long story short of this specific concept, the one takeaway I want you to understand is if your conversations are feeling boring, if your first dates are tough and you're not getting second dates, right? Or, people wanting to keep messaging you or keep hanging out with you, it's probably because your interactions are too much in level 1, right? It's too much third party, it's too generic, and that is what's kind of holding you back. When you understand how to have more conversation that is more level 2 and level 3, that's when things start feeling fun. That's when people start kind of engaging with you much more and are like, wow, they leave the interaction feeling like, wow, this guy's kind of cool. Okay. So hope that made sense. That's like, if you could only take one thing away from this lesson, it would be that. All right. And if you want to learn more about this, like more specifically, more tactics, more of like the frameworks, check out the authentic attraction module there. All right. See you soon.